Dr. Bay sat in the cold observation room, her eyes fixed on the screen before her. The green lines of alien text scrolled past, each word she had spent 3 years learning to decode. Her hands trembled as she read the message again, hoping she had made a mistake. She had not. The message was clear. The Empire would invade Earth in 47 days. She stood up quickly, nearly knocking over her chair. The coffee cup beside her keyboard had gone cold hours ago. Outside the window, she could see the lights of Geneva spreading across the valley below. Millions of people down there, going about their lives, not knowing what was coming. Grabbed her tablet and ran down the hallway. Her footsteps echoed in the empty corridor. It was 3 in the morning, but this could not wait. She burst into the security office where Myra was working the night shift. "Myra, I need you to send an emergency signal to Admiral, right now." Myra looked up from her monitors, surprised. "What's wrong?" "Everything," said her voice shaking. "They're coming." 6 hours later, Admiral stood before the United Council in New York. The large room was packed with representatives from every nation on Earth. The air was thick with tension. Was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had lost his wife and daughter 3 years ago during the first contact incident, when a scout ship had destroyed a civilian station without warning. He placed his hands on the podium and looked out at the assembled leaders. "Members of the Council, we have 41 days left. Dr. Bay has intercepted classified military communications from the Empire. They plan to invade Earth. They call it pacification. We know what that means." A screen behind him lit up with images. Burnt cities, enslaved populations, mass graves. These were photos collected from various sources across known space, showing what happened to worlds that had conquered. "They have done this to 14 other species," continued. "Every single one of them tried to negotiate first. Every single one failed. They do not negotiate with species they consider primitive." A councilwoman from Europe stood up. "Surely we must try diplomatic channels. We cannot just assume." "We intercepted their assessment of us," interrupted, his voice hard. "They call us fragmented, weak, easy targets. They laugh at our military capabilities. To them, we are animals to be caged." He tapped a button and audio played. It was a voice translated into English. The words were cold and dismissive. "The humans will surrender within 3 days of orbital bombardment. Their primitive loyalty structures will collapse. Estimated casualties, acceptable. Estimated resistance, minimal." The room fell silent. Myra stepped forward next. She was younger than barely 30, but her intelligence reports had kept Earth safe for the past 2 years. She activated a holographic map showing the Empire's territory. "Their empire spans 47 star systems," she explained. "They have military superiority in every conventional measure, but they have a weakness. They are arrogant. They do not believe anyone would dare strike them first." "What are you suggesting?" asked a council member from Asia. Admiral answered, "We strike first. We hit them before they hit us. We show them that humans are not easy prey." The room erupted in argument. Some called it madness, others called it suicide. But slowly, as the hours passed and more evidence was presented, the voices changed. Fear turned into anger. Anger turned into resolve. By sunset, the vote was cast. Earth would strike first. Captain received his orders that evening. He was in the training facility beneath Seoul, running combat drills with his special operations team. When the message came through, he read it twice to make sure he understood. He gathered his team in the briefing room. There were 20 of them, the best fighters humanity had. They had trained for 3 years. Ever since the first contact incident made it clear that humanity was not alone in the universe, and that the universe was not friendly. "We're going deep into enemy territory," told them. "Our target is Throne Station. It's their regional command center. If we destroy it, we cut off their ability to coordinate the invasion." A woman named Ara raised her hand. She was their demolitions expert, small but fierce. "What's our exit plan?" "We complete the mission first, then we worry about getting out." Nobody argued. They all understood what he meant. Over the next 30 days, preparations moved fast. Doctor worked with her team to create false identification codes. They studied every scrap of information about Throne Station. They learned its security protocols, its rotation schedules, its structural weaknesses. Ara and her engineering team built special charges designed to overload the station's reactor system. Lieutenant Jin Park, their best pilot, modified a stealth ship called Ghost Wing to mimic energy signatures. Meanwhile, Admiral gathered Earth's defense fleet. They had 43 warships in total. They were sending 300, but was not planning to meet them head-on. He was planning to make them angry, to make them reckless, to make them underestimate humanity one last time. On the 38th day, Captain and his team boarded Ghost Wing. Lee, their medic, checked everyone's equipment one final time. She had studied biology and knew exactly where to strike if things went wrong. "Stay sharp," told his team. "We're about to do something no one has ever done before. We're going to punch the biggest bully in the galaxy right in the face." Ghost Wing launched silently into space. Behind them, Admiral's fleet began moving toward the border systems, creating a diversion. They would see the fleet movement and think humanity was preparing a desperate defensive line. They would never expect an attack on. As Ghost Wing jumped into faster-than-light travel, looked at his team, they were scared. He could see it in their eyes, but they were also ready. Humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars. They had climbed from caves to the stars, and now they would show the galaxy what happened when you threatened Earth. The die was cast. In 9 days, the Empire would learn that humans were not prey. They were predators. Ghost Wing emerged from faster-than-light travel 3,000 kilometers from Throne Station. The station hung in space like a massive crown, its spires glowing with purple light. It orbited a conquered world called Prime, where millions of enslaved beings worked in factories below. Lieutenant Jin Park kept his hands steady on the controls. The stolen codes were transmitting automatically. His heart pounded as they waited for the station's response. "Ghost Wing, this is Control," a voice said in the language. "Your identification is confirmed. Proceed to Docking Bay 7. Jin exhaled slowly. "We're in." Behind him, Captain and his team prepared their weapons. They wore armor designed to look like military gear from a distance. Up close, it would not fool anyone, but they did not plan to get that close until it was too late. The docking bay was enormous. Ships of various sizes lined the walls. Soldiers moved about, performing routine duties. None of them looked twice at Ghost Wing as it settled onto the landing pad. And his team walked down the ramp. They moved with purpose, like they belonged there. Ara carried a large equipment case that held their demolition charges. Lee walked beside her, scanning the area with her medical sensors, which were actually mapping the station's layout. They made it 50 meters before an officer stopped them. He was tall, nearly 7 feet, with gray skin and 4 arms. His black eyes studied them with suspicion. "You are not from this sector. Explain your presence." His hand moved to his weapon, but Specialist Ara spoke first, in perfect engineering inspection team. "We are checking the reactor shielding. Orders from High Commander himself." The officer's expression changed. No one questioned his orders. He waved them through. They moved quickly through the station's corridors. The place was huge, housing over 40,000 military personnel and command staff. They passed training rooms where soldiers practiced combat. They passed control centers where officers monitored conquered systems. They passed holding cells where prisoners from a dozen different species were kept. Stopped at one cell. Inside were beings that looked almost human but with blue skin and larger eyes. They were huddled together, terrified. One of them, a child, looked up at through the transparent wall. "Keep moving," said quietly. "We cannot help them yet." They reached the reactor level 20 minutes later. The security here was. Guards stood at every checkpoint. Ara pulled out her false credentials again, but this time the guard wanted to inspect her equipment. "Open the case," he demanded. Ara opened it slowly. Inside were what looked like standard inspection tools. The guard picked one up, examining it. He did not know he was holding a quantum charge powerful enough to destroy half the station. "Proceed," he said, handing it back. They entered the reactor chamber. It was massive, a spherical room with the reactor core floating in the center, held by magnetic fields. Energy pulsed through it like a heartbeat. The whole station drew power from this one source. "This is it," Ara whispered. "Look at this. No redundant systems, no proper shielding. They built this assuming no one would ever dare attack it." She began placing charges at key structural points. Each one was small, no larger than a deck of cards, but together they would create a cascade reaction that would tear the station apart. Jin's voice came through their communications. "We have a problem. Someone at command just noticed our ship's logs do not match. We have maybe 10 minutes before they lock down the station." "We need 15, Ara said, still working. "Then work faster," replied. 8 minutes later, alarms began blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the station. Soldiers started running through the corridors. His team was making their way back to the docking bay when they ran into a squad of guards. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. The moment of truth had come. "Halt," the lead guard shouted. "Drop the pretense." He raised his weapon and fired. The electromagnetic pulse round hit the guard in the chest, sending him flying backward. His team opened fire instantly. The corridor exploded into chaos. Guards had superior strength and armor, but they had never fought humans before. They did not expect the speed, the aggression, the absolute refusal to back down. Dove behind a support pillar as plasma bolts scorched the air above her. She saw one of her teammates get hit and go down. She grabbed him and pulled him to cover, already reaching for her medical kit. But then she remembered something from her xenobiology studies. Had two hearts, one in their chest and one near their spine. She dropped her medical kit and grabbed her weapon instead. She aimed carefully and fired at the spine position of the nearest enemy. The guard dropped instantly. "Spine shots," she yelled. "Hit them in the spine." The tide of the fight shifted. The humans pressed forward, fighting with a desperation they had never encountered. Ara threw an explosive charge down the corridor, collapsing part of the ceiling and blocking reinforcements. They reached the docking bay with 5 minutes left before the charges would detonate, but the bay was now filled with soldiers. Ghost Wing was surrounded. Jin saw them coming and fired up the ship's weapons. He laid down covering fire, giving the team a path to run. They sprinted across the open bay floor, plasma bolts sizzling past them. Was the last one up the ramp. He turned and fired one more shot, hitting a guard who was too close. Then the ramp sealed and Jin launched the ship. They blasted out of the docking bay at full speed. Fighters scrambled to pursue them, but Ghost Wing was faster. Jin pushed the engines beyond their safe limits, racing away from the station. Behind them, Throne Station hung in space, still looking powerful and invincible. Then the charges detonated. The explosion started small, deep inside the reactor core, but Ara had placed the charges perfectly. The reactor's containment failed. Energy that powered an entire military command center suddenly had nowhere to go. The station tore itself apart from the inside. Explosions rippled across its surface. Entire sections broke away and tumbled into space. The beautiful purple lights flickered and died. And then, in one final catastrophic burst, the reactor exploded completely. The blast was visible from 3 star systems away. 40,000 military personnel died in an instant. High Commander, or who had planned Earth's invasion, was incinerated along with his entire command staff. The regional military network went dark. Dozens of conquered systems lost their oversight in a single moment. On Ghost Wing and his team watched in silence. They had done it. They had struck the Empire at its heart, but there was no celebration. They knew what this meant. "They will come for us now," Jin said quietly. "All of them." "Yes," agreed. "But we hit them first. We showed them that humans do not go quietly into the dark." Admiral received the news aboard his command ship, Defiance. He stood on the bridge, watching the scanner data confirms destruction. His officers cheered but remained silent. He thought about his wife and daughter, killed by 3 years ago. He thought about the 14 enslaved species. He thought about the 47 days that had now become 0 days. The war had begun, and humanity had thrown the first punch. Supreme Overlord stood in the grand chamber of the Imperial Palace, watching the holographic display with disbelief. The recording played again. Throne Station, pride of the regional fleet, exploding into fragments. 40,000 of his finest warriors gone. High Commander, or one of his most trusted officers, dead. And the cause of it all, humans, was ancient by standards, over 200 years old. He had conquered 23 species during his reign. He had crushed rebellions on 50 worlds. Never in all those years had a primitive species dared to strike first. He turned to his assembled commanders. How did this happen? None of them wanted to answer. Finally, one brave admiral spoke. "They infiltrated using stolen codes. We did not expect such audacity." "Audacity's voice rose. "They are insects. They have been in space for barely 50 years, and yet they destroyed our command station." He slammed his fist on the table. The holographic display flickered. "Send a message to all sectors," he commanded. "Humanity is now an extinction-level threat. I want 300 warships assembled, not to conquer them, to eradicate them. No survivors, no prisoners. When we are done, Earth will be nothing but dust and silence." The order went out across the Empire. From every sector, warships began to gather. The largest armada ever assembled for a single target. They were not just angry, they were humiliated, and they would make humanity pay for that humiliation. On Earth, Dr. Bay worked without sleep. The data Captain's team had stolen from was priceless. She sat in her lab, going through files with her team of scientists. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a schematic on her screen. "Their entire weapons system runs through a centralized targeting network. Every ship in their fleet connects to it." A young technician named looked over her shoulder. "So if we could disrupt that network, their ships would have to rely on manual targeting. It would slow them down significantly." His fingers flew across her keyboard. "We need to build a virus, something that can infiltrate their network during battle." She sent the schematics to Earth's top programmers. They had days, maybe weeks, to create a solution. Meanwhile, Commander Sung was turning the Sol system into a fortress. He stood in the orbital command center above Earth, coordinating construction crews across the system. "I want weapons platforms hidden in the asteroid belt," he ordered. "Use the asteroids themselves as cover, and start mining the approach vectors. If they come through normal space, I want them to hit surprises every 1,000 kilometers." His teams worked around the clock. They hollowed out asteroids and filled them with missiles, and they built automated defense platforms that looked like space debris. They created trap after trap, betting that they would be too confident to scan carefully. Captain, back from his mission, was given a new assignment. Admiral called him to the Defiance for a meeting. "The main fleet will arrive in strength," explained, "but they will have flagship command ships coordinating the attack. I need you and your team to board those flagships, cause chaos from inside." Boarding actions during a fleet battle raised an eyebrow. "That is insane." "Yes, but it might work." Looked tired. He had not slept since destruction. They think we will fight defensively. Every conventional tactic says we should, so we will do the opposite. While Earth prepared, something unexpected was happening across the Empire. The enslaved species had heard what humanity had done. Word spread through slave quarters and prison cells. The mighty were not invincible. They could bleed. They could die. On Factory World 4, a slave rebellion began. The workers overwhelmed their guards and seized a communications array. They broadcast a message into space. Humanity showed us the way. We will be free or we will die trying. On mining colony Vex 7, slaves sabotaged the equipment and fled into the mountains. Troops were pulled from the invasion fleet to restore order. On agricultural world Helios 9, the entire slave population went on strike. Without food production, supply lines were disrupted. The Empire was suddenly fighting fires on a dozen worlds, but refused to delay the invasion. These are minor disturbances, he told his commanders. Once we destroy humanity, the other species will remember their place. Myra monitored all of this from Earth's intelligence center. She compiled reports and sent them to Admiral. The Empire is fracturing, she told him. Our strike did more than destroy a station. It inspired hope. Hope is good, replied, but we need weapons. Specialist Ara was working on that problem. She had studied the stolen ship designs and found a critical flaw. Their ships were built for overwhelming firepower but poor maneuverability. They relied on their shields and armor to absorb damage while they pounded enemies into submission. We cannot outgun them, she told the engineering teams. But we can outmaneuver them. I want our fighters retrofitted for speed. Strip out everything except engines, weapons, and life support. Make them fast enough to get inside the firing solutions. Fighter Squadron Leader O volunteered to test the new designs. She climbed into the modified fighter and launched from the orbital platform. The ship accelerated like nothing she had ever flown before. The G-forces pushed her back into her seat, but she kept control. "This is incredible," she radioed back. "It handles like a dream." "Good," Ara replied, "because you are going to need to fly it through hell." 2 weeks after its destruction, the Armada reached the edge of the Sol system. 300 warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They came out of faster-than-light travel in formation, a wall of death stretching across space. On the bridge of Defiance, Admiral watched them arrive. His small fleet of 43 ships looked pathetic in comparison. Around him, his crew was silent, staring at the overwhelming force arrayed against them. "All ships," said calmly, "remember the plan. We are not here to win. We are here to make them pay for every meter of space they take." The fleet began moving forward. At its head was the massive flagship Dominion Eternal, where a general named or commanded the invasion force. Or looked at the human fleet on his displays and laughed. 43 ships. This will be over in an hour. All vessels advance. Show these primitives what real warfare looks like. But as the fleet moved deeper into the Sol system, strange things began to happen. Ships on the outer edge started hitting mines. Explosions rippled through their formations. Asteroids that had seemed empty suddenly lit up with weapons fire. And from Earth, from Mars, from the orbital stations, hundreds of small human fighters launched like a swarm of angry insects. The Battle of Sol had begun. The first wave of ships pushed through the minefield, accepting losses to maintain momentum. Explosions bloomed across space like deadly flowers. 6 cruisers were destroyed in the first 10 minutes, but 294 kept coming. O led her fighter squadron in a diving attack from above the orbital plane. 200 fighters, moving faster than anything that had ever fought. They came in low and fast, weaving through the enemy fleet like needles through cloth. "All wings target their sensor arrays," commanded. "Make them blind." Her fighters unleashed missiles at close range. then banked away before the point defense systems could track them. Explosions rippled across the hulls of battleships. Sensor dishes shattered. Communication arrays went dark. But they adjusted quickly. They formed defensive clusters, overlapping their fields of fire. Watched 5 of her fighters get caught in a crossfire and vaporize instantly. "Break and scatter," she ordered. "Reform on my mark." Commander Sung watched from his hidden asteroid fortress. He had positioned 20 of these secret bases throughout the belt. Now he gave the order. All fortress batteries open fire. The asteroids came alive with weapons, hurled projectiles at incredible speeds. Missile pods launched waves of smart munitions. The fleet suddenly found itself being shot from all directions. General or on Dominion Eternal snarled in frustration. These primitive tactics, all ships, identify and destroy those weapons platforms. But identifying them was difficult. The fortresses were hidden among thousands of ordinary asteroids. They had to scan each one carefully. It slowed their advance to a crawl. Admiral saw his opening. All ships attack Formation Delta, hit them while they are distracted. Earth's 43 warships surged forward. They were smaller than the vessels, less armored with weaker shields. But they had crews fighting for their home. They closed the distance fast, firing everything they had. The carrier Indomitable, commanded by Captain, pushed directly into the formation. Her shields took massive damage, alarms blaring across the bridge. But she kept going, launching fighters and torpedoes at point-blank range. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, her tactical officer reported. "We are losing atmosphere." "Seal those sections and keep firing," commanded. A battleship turned its main guns on Indomitable. The blast tore through her forward shields and ripped open her bow. Half her crew died instantly. But before the battleship could fire again, 3 human destroyers hit it from the side. Their combined fire punched through its armor. The battleship began to drift, disabled. Captain was on one of those destroyers, but not for long. "Launch boarding pods," he ordered. Small armored pods shot from the destroyer toward Dominion Eternal. They tried to shoot them down, but the pods were too small and too fast. They latched onto the flagship's hull like parasites. And his team cut through the outer hull with plasma torches. They entered a cargo bay, weapons ready. Marines were waiting for them. The fight inside the flagship was brutal. In the narrow corridors, the size became a disadvantage. His team moved in tight formation, covering each other with practiced precision. When it charged, 3 humans would hit it from different angles. Lee saved Specialist Aura from a plasma bolt by tackling her aside. The bolt scorched the wall where Aura had been standing, fired back without hesitation, hitting Lee in its spine. The creature dropped. "Thanks," Aura gasped. Move pulled her up. They fought their way toward the ship's main computer core. Aura carried a data pad with Doctor's virus program. All they had to do was plug it into the network. Outside, the main battle had become a chaotic melee. Commander Sung's fortresses were being destroyed one by one, but they had bought precious time. Fighter squadrons were down to half strength, but they kept attacking, refusing to quit. The fleet was winning. Slowly, steadily, they were pushing through. They had lost 40 ships, but they still had 260. Earth's fleet was down to 31 ships, many of them damaged. On Defiance, Admiral made a decision. He turned to his crew. "It has been an honor serving with you all. Communications, send a message to all surviving ships. Tell them to fall back to Mars orbit. Set up a final defensive line there." "What about us, sir?" his first officer asked. Looked at the tactical display. Dominion Eternal was at the center of the formation, coordinating the entire attack. If that ship was destroyed, the enemy fleet would lose cohesion. "We are going to ram them," said calmly. The bridge went silent. "Sir, if we do that," the first officer began. "I know exactly what happens," interrupted. and I am not ordering anyone to stay. Anyone who wants to evacuate has 2 minutes to reach the escape pods." Nobody moved. "Sir," the helmsman said, "if we are going to ram them, I should be the one flying this ship." Smiled sadly, "Thank you, all of you." Defiance turned and accelerated directly toward Dominion Eternal. The flagship saw them coming and opened fire with everything it had. Plasma bolts and missiles hammered into Defiance's shields. Inside the flagship, Ara had reached the computer core. She plugged in her data pad. The virus began uploading. Alarms shrieked across the network. The virus spread like wildfire, jumping from ship to ship through their centralized targeting system. Friendly fire protocols broke down. Ships began shooting at each other, unable to properly identify targets. "What is happening?" General Orr shouted. "Restore the network." "We cannot, sir. There is a virus in the system." Defiance hit Dominion Eternal at full speed. The impact was catastrophic. Both ships exploded in a massive fireball that lit up the battlefield. Admiral died instantly, along with his crew and General Orr. The fleet, already in chaos from the virus, now lost its flagship and commander. Ships broke formation. Some tried to retreat. Others fought on but without coordination. Doctor, watching from Earth, sent out a broadcast on all frequencies. She spoke in their language, addressing the enslaved crews forced to serve in their military. "This is Dr. Bay of Earth. We know you are prisoners forced to fight. We are transmitting instructions on how to sabotage your ship safely. You do not have to fight for the Empire. Choose freedom. Choose life." On 17 ships, the enslaved workers heard her message. They had seen what humanity could do. They had seen the bleed. Now they acted. Engineering decks were sabotaged. Power systems failed. Some ships exploded from internal damage. Others went dead in space, their engines offline. The tide had turned. What remained of her fighters for one final push? They hit the ships from every angle, targeting the engines and weapons. The modified fighters danced through enemy fire, too fast to track. When the battle finally ended, only 47 ships escaped the Sol system. The rest were destroyed, disabled, or captured. But Earth had paid a terrible price. Only 9 human warships survived. The Mars colony had taken direct hits. Orbital stations were in ruins. 4 million humans were dead. But they had won. 3 months after the Battle of Sol, Captain stood in the memorial garden that had been built in Geneva. 4 million names were carved into the black stone walls. He found the section with Admiral's name and placed a single white flower beneath it. Around him, thousands of people walked through the garden in silence. Some cried, some just stared at the names. Everyone had lost someone. His uniform was clean and pressed, but his body was covered in scars from the boarding action on Dominion Eternal. He and his team had survived, barely. Of the 20 people who had gone with him on that first mission too, only 12 remained alive. "I wish you could see what we accomplished, sir," whispered his name. "You would be proud." The Sol system was slowly rebuilding. The Mars colony was being repaired. New orbital stations were under construction, but the scars remained. Entire sections of the asteroid belt were now debris fields. The ruins of warships floated in space, monuments to the battle. Earth's remaining 9 warships had been joined by something unexpected: 23 captured vessels. Human crews had taken them over during the battle's chaos, with help from enslaved workers who had rebelled. Those ships were now being studied and reverse-engineered. Dr. Bay worked in a new facility built specifically for alien technology research. She stood before a holographic display showing the Empire's current state. What she saw was remarkable. The Empire was collapsing. After the catastrophic loss at Sol, rebellions had erupted on 42 worlds. The 14 enslaved species were rising up, inspired by humanity's example. The who had ruled through fear suddenly found that fear had turned to rage. On 4, the rebels had captured the planetary capital. On Vex 7, the governor had been executed by his former slaves. On Helios 9, the entire garrison had surrendered rather than face the angry population. Myra entered the lab, carrying a data pad. The Coalition of Free Worlds officially formed this morning. Representatives from all 14 liberated species signed the charter. Looked up from her work, and they want us to join. They want us to lead, Myra corrected. Humanity struck the first blow. They see us as the spark that started the fire. Sat down heavily. We lost so many people, Myra. 4 million dead. Is leadership really what we need right now? Maybe it is exactly what we need, a purpose, a reason to heal. Myra placed the data pad on the desk. The galaxy is changing. The old order is broken. We can help build something better. Across space, on what had been a revolution was taking place. The citizens had learned the truth about the invasion of Sol. 300 ships sent to conquer one primitive world. Only 47 returned. The greatest military defeat in history. Supreme Overlord had been captured not by enemies, but by his own people. They dragged him from his palace and put him on trial, his commanders against him. The enslaved species sent representatives to watch. The trial lasted 3 days, was found guilty of crimes against the galaxy. His punishment was exile to a prison colony, where he would spend the rest of his long life thinking about his failures. The new government was very different. They were led by a council rather than a single overlord. Their first act was to send a message to Earth. The transmission arrived at the United Council building in New York. The remaining world leaders gathered to hear it. Appeared on the screen, but this one looked different. His eyes showed something the humans had never seen before: humility. People of Earth, the said in accented English. I am council speaker and I speak for a new government, a new people. We come to you not as conquerors, but as beings seeking forgiveness. What our empire did was wrong. The invasion of your world was wrong. The enslavement of others was wrong. We offer unconditional peace. We offer reparations. We offer our technology and knowledge to help rebuild what we destroyed. We ask only that you give us a chance to prove we have changed. The human leaders debated for hours. Some wanted revenge. Others wanted to maintain hostility. But eventually Doctor spoke. We did not fight to become conquerors ourselves, she said. We fought to survive, to protect our freedom. If they are truly changing, we should help them change. Otherwise, what did our people die for? The vote was close, but peace was accepted. Over the next months, technology flowed to Earth. Medical advances that could heal injuries thought permanent. Energy systems that were clean and limitless. Manufacturing techniques that could rebuild cities in weeks rather than years. But more importantly, communication opened between the species. Came to Earth to learn about human culture. Humans traveled to worlds to teach them about democracy and freedom. It was awkward at first, painful even. But slowly, understanding grew. O, now promoted to commander, led a joint squadron of human and pilots. They patrolled the borders of the coalition territory, protecting against pirates and raiders. She had lost so many friends in the battle, but now she flew beside former enemies who had become allies. Specialist Aura worked with engineers, combining human innovation with their advanced material science. They created new ship designs that were faster and stronger than anything either species had built alone. Lee established the first interspecies medical program, training doctors from 8 different species to treat each other. She remembered the enslaved beings she had seen in those cells on. Now she was helping to heal them. Captain was promoted to admiral. He stood on the bridge of a new flagship, humanity's first true warship designed with knowledge from multiple species. It was called Defiance, in honor of ship. But Myra's intelligence network had discovered something troubling. Beyond the borders of known space, sensors detected strange signals. Something was out there, something potentially more dangerous than there had ever been. She brought her findings to the Coalition Council. Representatives from 15 species gathered to hear her report. "We are picking up gravitational anomalies in the outer reaches," Myra explained. "Energy signatures that do not match any known technology. Whatever is out there, it is big and it is moving." A counselor spoke up. "Our ancient records mention others, species that vanished long ago, species we thought were myths." "Myths have a way of becoming real," said quietly. The council voted to send an expedition. A mixed fleet of coalition ships would investigate. Humanity volunteered to lead it. They had learned an important lesson in the war. Sometimes you had to act first, before threats became unstoppable. Before the expedition launched, a ceremony was held at the Saul Memorial. Representatives from all coalition species came to pay respects to the 4 million humans who had died defending their world. Admiral gave a speech that was broadcast across 50 star systems. "They came to conquer us," he said, his voice steady. "They thought we were weak, primitive, easy prey, but they learned something that day. They learned that humans would rather die free than live as slaves. That lesson cost them an empire. It cost us dearly too. 4 million of our people, heroes, all of them. But because of their sacrifice, 14 other species are now free. An empire that ruled through fear has learned humility, and the galaxy will never be the same." He paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. "We struck first because we had no choice. We fought because we had to survive. But we won because we refused to give up no matter the odds. That is the legacy our fallen left us. Not hatred, not vengeance, but the knowledge that freedom is worth any price." The ceremony ended with a moment of silence. 4 million names, 4 million lives, 4 million reasons to never forget. Later, Admiral stood on Defiance's bridge as the expedition fleet prepared to launch. Doctor was going with them as Chief Science Officer. Myra commanded the intelligence vessel. Ara headed the engineering division, led the medical teams, commanded the fighter squadrons. They were ready for whatever came next. "All ships report ready," the communications officer announced. Looked at the star map showing unexplored space. Somewhere out there, something unknown was waiting. But humanity had learned its lesson well. They would not wait to be attacked. They would investigate. They would prepare. And if necessary, they would strike first again. "Take us out," ordered. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving Saul behind. They carried with them the memory of those who had fallen, the hope of those who survived, and the determination that had saved Earth. The galaxy had learned what happened when you threatened humanity. Now humanity was ready to face whatever else the universe had to offer. The price of defiance had been terrible, but the alternative would have been extinction, and humans, above all else, survived.